I'm going to tell you why the Chicago Bulls are not as far off as many Bulls fans would like you to believe. And it starts right now. Now, if you are new to the channel, please like the video. Please subscribe to the page. We do talk Chicago sports daily on this channel. It's the only channel talking Chicago sports, how Chicago talk. So make sure that you get in tune with us, man. So the Chicago Bulls have a big task ahead of them. They finished last season 40-42. Heading into free agency now, AK says Bulls fans will just have to wait and see what this team is going to be when we get through free agency. And after that, let the chips lie where they may. But where are the chips right now? Where is this Bulls team right now? And many Bulls fans would have you believe this Bulls team is basically a dumpster fire. They're in the toilet. There is no hope for this team. There is no future for this team. There is, you have to blow this thing up, tear it down all the way to the studs. And I just don't believe that is the case in basketball. Why? I'm not a fan of the tank. I never have been a fan of the tank. Tearing it down to the studs, what does that do? You're basically getting to rebuild your culture, rebuild your system, add different players in, and try to get this thing all the way to the bottom until you find that superstar player, that next level player, right? But here's the thing. There are a lot of really good players that have been drafted who are the under the radar guy, who are later in the first round guy, who are the later in the second round guy. And you want to know what? They're major contributors on a team. They're pieces that Chicago Bulls fans look at. If they're not free agents now, they're trying to trade for them and different things like that, as that's the piece that can get us over the top. What can we trade for him? If I trade Zach LaVine for this guy and this guy and this guy and this pick, then we could be right back in this thing. Well, some of those guys that you're naming were taken later in that first round, later in the second round, right? They turn themselves into the players that they are. And so I'm not a believer that you have to be at the bottom to get to the top. Here's what I am a believer in. The Chicago Bulls were a 40-42 team last season. Is that good? No, I'm not going to sit here and act like it is. They were 10th in the Eastern Conference. They were in the play-in. I'm not one of those guys that's big on we almost beat the team that went to the Eastern Conference Finals. Yeah, every dog can have their day. I think the Bulls were having a day until they weren't. Should they have gotten in? 100%. Do I think Billy Donovan made some decisions that kept them out? 100%. But at the end of the day, that's still not a good season. You're 40-42, right? Here's my thing with all of this. 8 games is the number. 5 games as a number to make you feel good. Number of what? The number of wins that we need to see this Bulls team add next season. And that is not an impossible feat by adding in somebody in free agency who is a lower money guy. Here's where I look at what the Bulls are doing so far this offseason and trying to see kind of what this is going to turn into. There's a baseline here with where this team is at, 40-42. 40 wins is a lot of wins in the NBA. Now, is it enough wins to say you're a championship contender? No, we're not near a championship contender yet. I don't know if y'all know this. 1998 was a long time ago. We're trying to build back to that. And that takes time. That takes process. That takes that continuity conversation. That takes a system coming into place. That takes development from young pieces. But you have to have a starting point for those pieces to matter. 5 games. That's what the Chicago Bulls are trying to make up this offseason. If the Bulls go 45, and what would that be? 45-37? We're having a different conversation on this Bulls team. Are they still very up and down? Are they still kind of in the middle? Are they still, kind of in that 5 to 6 range? 100%. But the conversation we're having now is that we can go into the luxury tax to try and add a bigger piece. The conversation that we're having now is that we can go into the luxury tax to try and add a more impactful piece to move us up. I know everybody wants to go from 8-1 in one offseason, but that's not a realistic situation. You have to find those pieces that are in place. And you look at the Denver model that the Bulls are basically going to pretty much follow to a T based on everything we've seen from how Arturis wants to operate this thing. You have to feel like, okay, if I operate like Denver did, then all of a sudden this might end up in a good place. Why? Because it took Denver basically 7 years to get that thing together. And you want to know what it was? 7 years of me saying Mike Malone isn't a very good head coach. 7 years of me going, Nikola Jokic, I love what he's doing. He's a dominant player, but he doesn't have a lot of help around him. All of a sudden, Michael Porter Jr. is healthy. Jamal Murray is healthy. Now remember, all that time as well, we're having conversations about Jamal Murray. Should he be moved? Should they try to get out of his deal? They add in Aaron Gordon. What's Aaron Gordon really to this team? Jokic ends up getting hurt one year. These are the things that teams go through in an NBA season or multiple NBA seasons until you get to that promised land. Now, here's the one thing that I always hear. Pat, there's no Jokic on this team. I don't know if I fully disagree with that. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Zach LaVine's going to become Jokic. Do I think that you move on from Zach LaVine because you feel like he's not your number one? No. You know what you do? You try to win as much as you can with Zach LaVine while finding your number one. Why would we pay a guy that's not going to help us win a championship? Doesn't mean he won't help you win a championship. Just means with the current roster that you have right now, it's not the best situation for him to help you win a championship. You still have to find that piece. And when having that piece is the most effective, when having that piece really helps the team the most, when there's a team in place for that piece to be able to accentuate on, to be able to excel on. Now, the one thing that I will say, the DeMar DeRozan deals, different things like that, I think that has slowed the progression of some of the players on this team. I do. I think there are too many people ahead of the young guys on this team that need shots. But that doesn't mean all of a sudden you just move off of these young guys. That doesn't mean you just blow everything up and start at zero. This is not 2K. It's not about creating a clean slate. And you're not sitting here dealing with a team that has multiple superstars on it. You are at a baseline right now. You're hoping to get back draft capital and filler, basically, and a good young player that's not going to be as good as Zach LaVine is right now, but it's different. Different isn't always better. Different sometimes is just different. You want to know what's going to happen if that young player comes over here and he's not making the same moves or doing the same thing that Zach LaVine is doing, and Zach LaVine goes somewhere else and is killing? You know what Bulls fans are going to say? Oh, why did we move on from Zach LaVine? That's how this always goes. And this is why I'm telling you that there is sunshine in what could be coming. 5 games has us talking about this offseason completely different. And realistically, the goal for the Chicago Bulls next season is probably 8 games. And as sad as it is to say, as sickening as it is to say, we've seen teams do this recently. The Cleveland Cavaliers, the New York Knicks. Right? Jalen Brunson wasn't a piece that was supposed to be this, oh my God, piece. He wasn't supposed to be this dominant player that he ended up being. They were, even Knicks fans, host of Locked On Knicks did a podcast with us and literally said, I think we all were surprised by what Jalen Brunson brought to this team. Sometimes it's just about putting the players in the right situation for them to be successful and being able to find that guy who is a gem, who's a diamond in the rough, who's going to be that next level, right? Like who's supposed to just come in and fill a role, but that role allows him to be the player that he is now. Is that on AK to do? Is that on Mark Eversley to do? 100%. I'm not saying there's not work to be done, but the fact that you're starting at a baseline where we're talking about 8 games that you probably could find in looking throughout the season. How many times are we sitting here after a game talking about how the referees hose the Bulls on calls throughout the entire game? How many times are we sitting here talking about how at the end of the game, somebody ended up or a call doesn't go the Bulls' way that puts them in a losing situation? You can't tell me you can't find 8 games that the Chicago Bulls were competitive in that they couldn't have gotten wins in. And we're sitting here at the end of this thing in entirety having a completely different conversation. I'm not saying that those are the results that ended up, but I'm saying that you're not that far from those results being what puts this Bulls team in the right direction. I look at this situation that the Bulls are in now as an opportunity with free agency coming up, young players in the system, to finally look at your team and say, okay, how do we get to this next step with the players that we currently have? How do we get to this next step by adding somebody who does something very, very specific? We're talking about the point guard position a ton, but realistically, a shooter is the main thing the Bulls need. I would love to be able to get that in both, get a 2-in-1 kind of player in that situation, but getting a shooter Getting somebody whose mindset is just to shoot, and even adding in somebody who's going to change the mindset of the players here, bringing in a shooting coach to me is the perfect thing to do, because you know what a shooting coach is going to do? He's going to teach you when to shoot. He's going to teach you how aggressively to shoot. He's going to teach you how to find open shots. It's sad that the Bulls didn't basically have one to this point. He's basically going to be the head of player development now, but you have to look at all the things that the Bulls are doing, even the behind the scenes stuff, the underground stuff, and it really tells you how far back this Bulls team was behind everybody else in the league pretty much. The fact that we didn't have a shooting coach who could be the head of our player development situation, who can lead everything, who can teach the player development, who can improve the players that we currently have on this team. Because here's the thing, AK knows one thing. You can't build teams by just going out and paying for the best player. Those teams usually don't win. The Phoenix Suns is fun, right? The Phoenix Suns is a fun team. But realistically, look at your previous champions. Maybe here and there you get a LeBron James type of winning situation where he's the one that, right, like him, and he's added in with another superstar, and those guys end up winning a championship. But look at the situations. Denver developed, Golden State developed, Milwaukee developed, Golden State, San Antonio. You got 2 years with the Miami Heat, the Dallas Mavericks, the Lakers teams before that all developed. They weren't just buying pieces and building in. Boston Celtics, that was a buy-in situation, right? The Spurs, development. But you look at your consistent winners, your perennial winners, your teams that are often in the NBA championship on the winning end, they are usually developed. And I think that that is the most important thing that the Chicago Bulls need to focus on moving forward. It's not finding the next best piece. It's not finding the next big player that's going to come off of these situations in free agency and be this superstar already that just wants to be in Chicago and take a team-friendly discount. It's about developing the players that you currently have on your team and adding youth into those players while still being in a winning situation. Because you know what? Those young players don't end up making that next move, taking that next step. Those young players don't end up, what's the word I'm looking for here? They don't end up having as big of an impact if you don't have players around them that are going to allow them to go out there and make and be impactful, or be right the addition, the salt on top, the garnish, right, to a winning season. Usually those young players come in, they ball out, they dominate in a bunch of losses. What I want to see is similar to what the Bulls are doing, maybe not exactly how they've gone about it. Again, I don't know if I go out and get DeMar DeRozan. I think Lonzo Ball is probably a deal I still would have made, even knowing, right, the concerns. I maybe wouldn't have given him as much money, but I knew the Bulls needed a point guard. Bulls went out and got a point guard. They took a swing, they missed. It happens. But at the end of the day, you have to have that young guy. You have to have that young player who's going to be able to add to the team in a winning situation. And that doesn't happen on teams that are tanking, that are at the bottom of the barrel, that are, right? Like, you want to see that development come together. And so I love that the Chicago Bulls this offseason had a conversation and brought in a guy who was huge in player development. That is what this team needs most. It's not going out and finding that next big superstar, because that next big superstar might not stick around long. That's probably a 1 to 2 year type of thing. Oh, but it was fun for those 2 years. Yeah, but look at Brooklyn. They got Mikal Bridges. You look at those pieces on that team and you're like, this should feel better, but it doesn't. Nobody's talking about Brooklyn going into next season as this dominant team. Nobody's talking about Brooklyn going into next season as this team that's going to be making a finals run. You're talking about Brooklyn at the beginning stages, building a baseline up yet again. The other thing that people are always going to bring up, oh, but at least they have the draft capital. Why do you guys think that the Bulls are devoid of draft capital? Again, it's because there's a lot of I want it now and not I want it in the future type mentality. And that's just not how you build a basketball team. It's not how you build any sports team, right? 2024, Bulls do have that Blazers pick. Blazers seem like they're going all in trying to make the playoffs. We'll see what that ends up being. They also have their second round pick. Oh no, the Pelicans have the Bulls' second round pick next season. 2025, that pick, that draft class pretty much goes to the Spurs, right? For the DeMar DeRozan trade. 2026, Bulls. 2027, Bulls. 2028, Bulls. 2029, Bulls. 2030, Bulls. Bulls have all their draft capital outside of 3 picks over the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. There's still a future in this team. AK did not sell the future of his team. What he sold off was the draft this year that literally every one of us has looked at and has gone, eh. The fact that the Bulls even traded in and added a guy who is a DJJ type defender, hopefully he can turn into a little bit better shooter, but a DJJ type defender is an improvement. Oh, they also went and got the MVP of the freaking March Madness. Right? Additions. But I don't see how those pieces fit. How do those pieces make sense? Right? Like we need shooting on this team and you didn't go get any shooting. We do need shooting. And as AK said, that will be addressed in free agency. That's something they're going to look at on the free agent market, because that is a role player that could just simply be an addition that all of a sudden makes this team what? 5 games better? Very different conversation next season. Who's that shooter going to be? I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I fully understand everything that's going to go on with AK and how he's going to do this, how he's going to make this move, how this team. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, you know, I have all the answers on what moves AK is going to make. But the one thing that I can tell you is that AK has not come in here and really been a liar to us. He has not lied to us about what he's trying to accomplish. He's not lied to us about what he's trying to do. There was a very major setback in one of the major pieces that he thought was going to be a part of this team moving forward, basically not having a knee. That player's now not going to play next season. So you have to be able to pivot. You have to find a way to pivot in a situation that you've kind of locked yourself into. But who would have thought that the 24-year-old would never be able to play basketball again? Not saying I'm hoping that on him, but that's kind of seeming where it's going, right? And so for me, when I look at the situation that the Bulls are in, I don't see gloom and doom. I see a tough situation right now that I can see this team easily being able to pivot out of with one thing and one thing only, and that's development. And oh, by the way, he actually invested in that development this offseason. Right? That's where I look at this team and I have the most questions. Kobe White, 23. I don't know if this is their real ages, but I know they're mad young. P. Will, 21. Dalen Terry, 20. You look at most of this team. Most of this team is young as heck. Even the young kid they drafted this year, right? He's 19, one of the youngest players in the draft. You got to start developing these young pieces. And once that development is able to start taking place, that's when you look at, oh, but we also got Zach LaVine. Listen, Nikola Jokic is an amazing player, but Nikola Jokic isn't as amazing without his number 2 on the team. Whether Zach LaVine ends up being the number 2 or not, that's the piece that you're looking at right now and saying, okay, that is a stable piece. We know what that piece is going to be. Is he a number 1 on a team? Probably not. Oh, but you paid him the max. Yeah, you did. Players make a lot of money in today's NBA. You shouldn't be trying to build your team around him. You got to find that next guy who's going to be their next future. But you're not going to be able to just go out and buy that guy. That situation literally almost never works. And so when I look at this team, I see the Bulls at a baseline right now. 10th in the East, whatever that is, 40 wins. Can you go out and find me a piece that adds me 5 wins? Can we have enough development in the players that we have on this team in the offseason? Remember, Kobe White was somebody everybody wanted off of the team last year. Now everybody's like, you can't just get rid of Kobe White, right? So now you're in a situation where you're hoping for somebody to take another step, a young piece to take another step so that you can look at this team a little bit differently. The Bulls are not in a, oh my God, this is the end of the world scenario. The Bulls are in a scenario right now where you can make additions that literally can get this team better in one offseason. and that you need to have those players who we talked about taking a step last offseason take a step. Patrick Williams, Ayo Dosunmu, Kobe White, Dalen Terry, Marko Simonovic. Look how much youth this team has. They've got the youth. They've got it. Oh, but it's the wrong youth. You have to build these guys up. You have to make these guys the right youth, even if they just become role players on this team. And then you have to go out and find the right youth. You have to go out and draft the right youth. It's not going to be instantaneous, Bulls fans, but it's not the end of the world either. Hey, as always, it's your boy Pat the Designer back at it again. Feel like I've been rambling for a little while, man, but I appreciate you guys for sitting here listening. As always, it's your boy Pat the Designer back at it again. To continue watching our Chicago Bulls content, click the links on the screen. Check the links in the description below. And if you're only here just for the Bulls content, make sure to tune into the Chicago Bulls Breeze, where we talk nothing but Bulls over there as well. Y'all stay safe out there, Chicago. Appreciate the love. Peace.